My name's Liz Regasess. I'm Director of Community Engagement here at the Aquarium. The Aquarium is a nonprofit conservation organization that has protected and cared for our ocean and marine animals for more than 50 years. We also share our ocean conservation mission with the more than 1.2 million visitors who come to the aquarium each year, with the goal of inspiring them to love, respect, and act for the ocean. We are delighted to be hosting Dr. Nevada Winrow this evening in honor of Black History Month. Tonight's event is made possible with generous support from the Lowell Institute, which allows the aquarium to offer our lecture series free of charge. Dr. Winrow is a pediatric neuropsychologist, educator, certified master scuba diver, and co-founder of the Black Girls Dive Foundation. Black Girls Dive is a nonprofit organization for underrepresented girls aged 9 to 17 that combines a science and art-based curriculum with scuba diving. Dr. Winrow founded Black Girls Dive with her daughter, who's here tonight, Taylor Simone Winrow, after noticing an absence of Black females at a scuba diving event held by the National Association of Black Scuba Divers. Their goal was to motivate girls to learn about and get excited by the ocean, and in the process, discover their own STEM identity, science, technology, engineering, and math, through projects focused on conservation and planetary stewardship. Black Girls Dive is a year-round, weekend-based program with chapters in Maryland, New Jersey, Delaware, and Georgia. The program's curriculum, in addition to teaching swimming and scuba diving, includes projects focused on shark research and conservation, coral restoration, collaborative oyster restoration and education, and national parks preservation. Aside from her work with the Black Girls Dive Foundation, Dr. Winrow has served as a clinical practitioner, professor, and administrator in higher education for over a decade, and has served as a trustee at 2 historically Black colleges and universities. Dr. Winrow is a past member of the Fulbright Scholars Review Board and the Board of Examiners for the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. She currently serves on the board of the Johns Hopkins Medical and Surgical Association. She is a master scuba diver and associate member of the Women's Diving Hall of Fame, as well as the American Academy of Underwater Sciences. She is also the national chairwoman of youth programs for the National Association of Black Scuba Divers. Dr. Winrow is an FAA licensed drone pilot and a member of the Maryland Civil Air Patrol. She is also a Civil Air Patrol aerospace educator. Dr. Winrow is an alumna of Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, Howard University, and Lincoln University, and completed fellowships in neuroradiology, psychoneuroimmunology, wow, cognitive neuroscience, and neurochemistry. And I don't know when you have any free time. So with that, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce you to the stage, Dr. Nevada Winrow.
Well, good evening, everyone. Oh, let me turn on I have a propensity to walk around when I talk. So today, I wanted to spend some time talking about our Streams program. Our Streams program has been around since 2017, and it's going pretty well. We had a little snag during COVID, but we were able to be agile enough to pivot and focus more on to online learning. So it allowed our young ladies to be able to still be engaged with STEM learning. So my talk this evening is about broadening minority participation in aquatic-based STEM programming. And I always like to start talking about the historical context of why programs like mine is so important. And looking at historical barriers, there are 2 sides. One, you have your historically excluded side, where there was a denied access to pools, as well as beaches, as well as denial of access to quality higher education. And then on the other side, what happens is it yields underrepresentation in aquatic-based recreational activities, a lack of representation in undergraduate aquatic-based STEM studies, and then limited representation in the workforce. So it just has a domino effect when your foundation, there's a lack of access at the foundational level. And I always like to show this, these 2 memes when we think about why we have historically not seen Black women in the aquatic spaces. So the first one is looking at what it looks like to be at a Black pool party versus what it looks like to be at a white pool party. We all know, well, you may not know, one of the big issues with women of color is getting the hair wet. So they're not getting in the pool. They'll hover around the pool, they'll party, but they're not getting in the water. And we address these things at the beginning with our young ladies, particularly talking about maintaining hair. The other cultural narrative is that Blacks don't swim. And for some reason, that has seemed to translate it into, well, you need to swim to go into the marine sciences, which is not true. You can be in a wet lab. You don't have to be in the ocean to actually study marine sciences. So that's another type of barrier where there's this misconception about what you need to do to go into the marine sciences. So we talk to the young ladies and just explaining various pathways that they can enter into, where if they choose not to get in the water, they don't have to. So with barriers, further barriers to participation, we know in under-resourced and underprepared schools, it's a STEM desert. They don't have a lot of STEM classes. They don't have the teachers or the funding to support a strong STEM program. And then there's also very few, if at all, AP classes for students to take. So that actually has an impact on them and their preparedness when it's time to go into post-secondary education. One of the other areas that we focus on is helping our young ladies select courses, finding other opportunities that's outside the school. I'm a true believer that education comprises of both formal education and informal education. So my program is an informal science education. And we talk with our young ladies to look at other programs and other opportunities that they can participate in to kind of build up their confidence and their science knowledge background. Let me stop looking at that. Other barriers to participation are economic barriers. When you go into any STEM program at the post-secondary level, a big part of your training is internships. And a lot of internships are not paid. So if you're coming from a household where there's an expectation that you might have a summer job, you might have to work at McDonald's or wherever, you have to decide, do I take that job to support my family, or do I do an internship that I can't get any money? So one of the way we help our BGD scholars is that we provide a paid internship. So in collaboration with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, we send our young ladies there for the summer so they can get the training and they can also get funding to help support themselves. Other barriers are gendered experiences. There was a study done by Barbara back in 2018 that kind of talked about, kind of a climate of harassment in the field, and also mismatched mentorships. And actually that can occur across all spaces. We all know that you really need to have a good relationship with your mentor, or that experience isn't going to go too well. So what we do is we match our BGD scholars with a mentor. So we spend a lot of time making sure that there is a good fit. Positive factors in STEM engagement, we all know it's about the early exposure, culturally relevant pedagogy, something that they can relate to. For instance, one of the big things that a lot of our BGD scholars didn't understand was about the sewage drains, and thinking that that's where you sweep your trash. It's like, no, that's not what that's for. This is storm drainage. So just giving them material where they can kind of relate things in their environment and understand how that impacts themselves as well as their community. Self-efficacy in STEM, having our BGD scholars actively engaged in research. And I'll get a little more into that when I talk about what I call our CPR model. Authentic science engagement. So this is about encouraging them to participate in science fairs, and just looking at overall things that are important to them that they can study. Availability of role models and mentors, I talked about that. They're not a lot, but we try to create a consortium of professionals that are there for them, that we know having them will have a positive impact on their learning. And then, of course, your participation in after school and summer learning. There's this, what I call the summer melt, where some students, once they're finished with school in June, they kind of just go out there, they're video gaming, they're not actively engaging. And then when they get back in the fall, it's like they're doing a catch up again. So that's why our program is year round. We do give them a little break, but it's year round, just to keep them actively engaged. With addressing racial equity and equality, we look at it as an outcome and a process. So as an outcome, it's where racial equity and equality is achieved when race no longer determines outcome. In terms of process, you're looking at racial equity being obtained where, those most impacted by structural inequity are meaningfully involved in the creation and implementation of their institutional policies, programs, and practices. So this is like, for instance, we have a student advisory board that they're actively engaged. We're getting feedback to understand what worked for them, what didn't work for them. So it's that process of continuous learning and improvement that we spend a lot of time with. And I'll talk about a little bit more towards the end when we get into how we collect our data and how all of our practices are data informed. Another part of when we decided to develop this program back in 2017, we looked at a lot of research on STEM identity and agency. So this is the CPR model I was talking about, where it's a culmination of a person's competence, their performance, and their recognition, which is very important, by meaningful others. So it's like you have other scientists acknowledging that they're understanding concepts, that they're doing well in the laboratory. So that recognition brings about a reputation. And that reputation is a marker of being perceived that you know what you're talking about. So you don't fall into the imposter syndrome, thinking that you don't belong. So this was very important in how we decided to kind of structure all of our programmatic activities. The second thing is your practice-linked identities. So this is having access to the domain, so the STEM domain, and the opportunity to actually play an integral role in science. So again, that's your science fairs. That's, and I'll talk about it a little later, but that's our capstones that they do at the end of every year. And there are opportunities to engage in self-expression and just to feel valued, just to feel like, they're competent in their setting. And again, getting away from, cultivating this sense of just being, the imposter syndrome. So we spend a lot of time on practice-linked identity activities to ensure that we're cultivating what we call their STEM identity. So our streams program, which is science, technology, robotics, engineering, the arts, math, and scuba diving. It addresses the racial and socioeconomic achievement gap that undermines ideals of freedom, equity, equality, and opportunity. Also, the need for the advancement of collaborative strategic partnerships. So we spend a lot of time partnering with aquariums, partnering with schools. It takes a village. So it's a combination of your formal and informal learning to kind of solidify these young ladies' STEM identity. And also looking at the underperforming educational STEM pipeline and how that actually impacts the post-secondary education in the workforce. So we're spending a lot of time working with schools, working with community partners, and again, for instance, like our WHOI partnership, to ensure that there is a constant link in what they're learning with us and how they're putting their learning into practice. With our program, our two primary goals are just, again, broadening minority participation in the marine sciences by addressing the systemic race-based barriers, and then, again, establishing the communities of practice, getting everyone involved, from the aquariums, from the schools, and so forth. So they're an ally, and they're there to support social justice and, advocate for equity. So our young ladies have the opportunity to perform and be recognized for the work that they're doing. Now, in terms of the structure of our program, so we have various tracks. So track 1 is our scuba and scientific diving track. So with the scuba, they're getting their basic training. They get their specialty training, such as dry suit, full face mask, advanced open water. Right now, we have a cohort now that's working on full face mask with the comms, and it's just very interesting because they like to talk while they're underwater. And it's like, the more you talk, the more you're gonna blow by your ears. Like, just be quiet. Keep using your hand signals. And then each year becomes more advanced. So they'll go into their scientific dive training, which we do with the University of Delaware. Here they're learning about research methodology, data collection, and the one thing they fear is statistical analysis, but they'll get there. Like, you need your data. The marine science and technology track, so we have our ROVs, our AUVs, which they love. So they build their remote operated vehicles from scratch. So we use the MATE system. We started out with CPERTs, but we switched to MATE. So it gives them the opportunity to see how these things are built. So they're taking classes in electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, structural engineering, just to understand what goes into producing these ROVs. And then, of course, the fun part is the piloting. So they get a chance to learn how to operate those basic MATE ROVs. And then we also have the professional level ROVs that are running about 5 to, I think our most expensive is 10,000. So we keep them at the MATE section for about 2 years before they get to what we call the big guys. But they're still learning just how to navigate, how to pilot. We also have a simulator. We require them to do the simulation first before they actually use the professional ROVs. The same thing for our drones. We start them out with very small tele drones. So they're learning about coding, where you get into the autonomous operation. And then we move forward to our bigger DJI drones that are pretty big. But start them out small in case they crash that. Another big component is the shark tagging and the GIS training. So they love pulling the sharks onto the boat. So we work with Dr. Neil Hammerslag. Initially, we were at the University of Miami, where they were doing their shark tagging. Now we work with Dr. Hammerslag with his own Shark Research Foundation. So what they're doing, they're pulling the sharks up on the boat, they're taking measurements, and then they're tagging their dorsal fins with a tag. So what they're doing is they're checking or studying or following their migrational paths of where these sharks are actually going. So again, they're learning about physics, they're learning about GIS and geocaching. They really like that. The other one is the aquarium diving, and that falls into our conservation and just looking at careers and career opportunities that exist at an aquarium. So they dive the Georgia Aquarium, the Disney Aquarium at Epcot, the Denver Aquarium, and this December they're diving the Dubai Aquarium. So they're gonna have a good time with that. We also have a behind the lens track. So this is their underwater photography. So they take classes in basic photography, just understanding about lenses, aperture, and so forth. So we have professional photographers teaching them the mechanics, the physics behind a camera, and then they go on to underwater photography, and then that following year they go into photogrammetry where they're doing some VR stuff and some 3D modeling. Then they simultaneously, we start them with storytelling, just, learning how to tell a story. And interesting enough, we've even tagged that into our GIS. We use ArcGIS and story maps. So they're learning how to tell their stories with the geotag. And then they get into underwater cinematography so they can, tell their story underwater. They're having a good time doing that. And our capstones. Then our capstones are basically, it's almost like a final every year. So the capstone is a culmination of everything they learned that year. It is standardized, so everybody goes through the same process in the same place. So historically, first year, we would go to a 4FAR station at BIOS. There, they would do their checkout dives, and they're doing some turtle conservation and research. And I'm trying to think what else. They do their fish identification and some coral identification their first year, and then they transition over to the Coral Restoration Foundation where they're taking care of the coral. They're learning how to take care of the coral nursery. So it gets more advanced as they go along. For the past 2 years, we switched from 4FAR station to the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Science. So now all first years go to BIOS. First year and fourth years, BGD scholars go to BIOS. They do the checkout dives, whether it's open water or if it's their advanced open water. They spend time there. They're learning more about ROVs and what Arizona State University is doing with ROVs and so forth. And then third year, they go to Egypt. So we literally just got back in November for our second Egypt trip. We took 26 individuals. So this is their advanced capstone. The density of water is very different in that Red Sea. So they're learning about, this is how my buoyancy is doing here versus when we were either at 4FAR or we were in Bermuda. The dolphin plus marine mammal responder is another capstone where they're learning about rescuing mammals and animal behavior. So they spend several days at the DPMMR. So they split their time. Since Coral Restoration Foundation is like 5 miles from them, so we kind of put those two capstones together where they're learning about mammals and rescue and the importance of rescuing and conservation. One of the big things that are important just to us in our process for continuing improvement is our data collection and making sure we have quality data that can tell a story to ensure that we are having an impact on our youth. So the tools that we use, one is called the Dimensions of Success. This is a qualitative tool that's looking at the quality of delivery of instruction. The other one is the Common Instrument Suite. We have a version for the students to complete and a version for the educators to complete. So this is an interesting tool in that it's standardized. So it's looking at what people are saying. You can break it down and look at region. You can look by state. You can look by grades to kind of get an idea of how your program is actually impacting your student, particularly as it relates to STEM identity. So it's asking questions. It's called a retroactive type of survey. So the student is comparing what they knew before they came into our program versus what they know now. So it has a series of categories that looks at everything from student engagement to their perception of the quality of instruction, as well as there's like an emotional component. How did you feel as a result of your experiences? So it's a great tool. Any tool is great when it's standardized. So this is something that we use to kind of inform our programming. And that's our program. Any questions? Oh, is this one? Did I turn off the level R?
You keep that microphone.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Winrow. That was incredible.
I hope I wasn't talking too fast. I have a propensity to ramble.
No, that was fantastic. And I still don't know how you ever have any free time, especially when you went through all the tracks that the program has. It's incredible. So we'll open it up to questions. I will selfishly start with one of my own. You use the phrase, "it takes a village," and it's so true. I can reflect on my own life and everyone that has had an impact on where I am today. But I'd love to hear a little bit about what your village looked like, whether that's growing up or getting into your career. Your resume is incredible. So who surrounded you as you were growing?
Everybody. So I had a unique trajectory. I was a teenage mom. So my daughter was actually 3 months old when I went into my freshman year in college. So I had my parents, I had my grandparents, that were, and as well as I had my mentors at the school that supported me. So definitely takes a village.
Yeah, definitely. From inside your family and beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions in the audience? Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So I'll repeat the question first for the virtual audience. So at first, she shared her gratitude for your resume and all the work you do while still maintaining your identity as a Black woman. And it really resonated with you in your own journey as a Black woman and looking for your own career and life ahead. So thank you. That is very impactful. And then your question was about HBCUs and if you recommend that, if she's interested in them.
There are several HBCUs that focus on marine science. For instance, you have Dr. Chikbu, who is at Dell State, that has a very good program. Hampton has a very good, strong program as well. Those are the two that stand out for me, is Hampton and Dell State. I just let it go.
The question was about, yeah, yes. The
A
question
good
was about Black
conditioner and
women.
pre-wash, but
Black women's hair and getting in the water and how Dr. Winrow manages that for herself.
yeah. It's a topic. It makes some of the girls nervous. Some of our BGD scholars have sister locks, but we do spend some time talking about pre-treating the hair before it gets wet, and just how to manage it, particularly with salt water with our hair, and just taking care of it. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm also getting fed questions from the virtual audience, so
Oh, wow,
if you see
okay.
me looking at my phone.
She's texting.
Okay, here's one question. How do the girls in the program get picked? Can they self-nominate?
They can. So we have a process. We have a application open enrollment where they apply. So our applicants, the process comprises of they complete the application. We require 3 recommendations, one from the math teacher, the science teacher, and then also the assistant principal. The assistant principal is very important because that's generally the individual that manages behavior, discipline. So that plays a major role in our decision. You know, scuba diving is a recreational sport, but it's a dangerous sport. So we make sure that there are no pre-existing problems that could potentially interfere with that individual's learning or the learning of others. We also require report cards, so we're looking at how well they perform throughout the year. We do recognize that some people still they may struggle in science class, but they still really are interested in science. And we generally are able to tease that out when they do their interview. So we have a panel. We use a scoring rubric that's behaviorally anchored to get an idea of what their strengths and weaknesses are when we make our selection.
Yeah, you spoke about formal and informal education, and so that sounds like it resonates, that maybe some people do a little better out in the field versus classroom or vice versa.
Yeah, so we definitely take that into consideration. And thus far, you know, we have a 100% college acceptance rate. Not only are they getting accepted, they're getting into their first choices. So whether we have some that are at Coastal Carolina University, some that are at Drexel. We have one student who actually is integrating art with science. They're actually looking at doing underwater animation. So she's at Savannah College of Art and Design. So she's at SCAD. I'm blocking on where Danielle is. But 100% college admission rate. They go. We have one young lady at Coastal Carolina, our first graduating senior. So the other data that we look at is after they leave our program, 1, are they getting into college? 2, are they majoring in a STEM field? Are they graduating in the STEM field? That's another data point. And then what are they doing after that? We also are checking, are they going into grad school or are they going directly into the workforce? So we're at that point now, being founded in 2017. We're just starting, that data's just starting to trickle in.
Amazing. I have one more virtual question. For those students that stick with the whole process, what are the breadth of career pathways that utilize the skill sets they've developed?
They're going into college, so I can't take full responsibility. But they're going into marine sciences. Like I said, they're going into animation. We actually have a student at Spelman who is looking at psychology and business. But psychology is a science too.
Any in-person? Oh, yes, right in the front.
How do you find these students and encourage them to apply for this program that they may not feel totally comfortable applying for from the get-go?
So our community partners.
I'm going to repeat the question real quick.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. How do you find the girls to join the program, and especially if they might not feel like they're fit or they're not ready or whatever the barrier is?
So community partners, we send out flyers, also neighborhood schools, and then word of mouth. Word of mouth.
Great talk, by the way. And I think this question kind of piggybacks off of that one is, so it sounds like the participation from the girls is ones that have already kind of built that interest in marine science and being able to have this pathway into career. Has there been any thought into building kind of even more of a process from, there are a lot of you that, you know, might be afraid of swimming because of history of, you know, of our pool use like in the past, and you know their parents were afraid to swim, so therefore
Yes.
they're afraid to swim. So like, has there been thought of even not necessarily like of having swimming programs and even building more of that pathway from, rather than getting the people that already kind of have that
Right.
pathway?
We looked. Okay.
That's okay. The question is, it sounds like the program targets girls who at least have some initial interest in these fields, but have you thought about maybe even taking a step back from that, for example, swimming lessons and getting over those historical barriers.
Yes, so we looked at that. The problem is that gets into another insurance bracket when you're dealing with children, because again, these are children. We take young ladies as young as 9. So our youngest certified diver was 9. So when you start talking about individuals that may have a fear of water and then teaching them how to swim, that takes us to another stratosphere with our insurance. And it kind of requires us to reallocating funding that's not directly related to our mission. So we try to stay on mission.
Yeah, right there. So the question is, how did you get into diving and what brings you the most joy?
Well, I'm a Pisces. No. I just always loved water. My mom could swim. My grandfather, dad were Navy men. So I had kind of like a unique background experience. My mother took me to the Y as a toddler. So I've just always loved the water.
Yep, right here.
I'm curious to know what your funding sources are. How are you funding the program?
Grant writing.
So the question is, what are your funding sources? How are you funding this work?
Right, so grant writing, currently we're supported by the Simons Foundation, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Maxar Foundation. We've just finished up a grant cycle with the Roddenberry Foundation, so a lot of grant writing.
I'll add in a question here too, speaking of funding, just with the state of the world right now, how are you feeling? How has that or has it not impacted the work you're doing? Do you feel more committed? I don't know.
We have been getting inundated with applications, yeah. And it's going to require some rethinking, particularly, we're getting calls from all over the country, and, our chapters are home-based, so you have to live in that state. So we're having a board meeting in a couple of weeks to kind of talk about how can we address this new need, since we are already set up with distance learning. So we use a Google Classroom platform and trying to figure out how are we going to broaden our space for people who are outside of our physical area.
That's great. Question? Yeah, the question is where are you focused geographically and what's the future?
Sure. So we're looking to partner with the New England Aquarium to have a chapter here. We have a chapter at the University of Delaware, a chapter in New Jersey, 2 chapters in Maryland, and then we have the Georgia Aquarium chapter. So part of our Maryland chapter is with the National Aquarium. So we like to also anchor ourselves with aquariums. Yes, we have started, we're building the West Coast chapter in LA.
Any other questions? I have a few, but yes.
I just want to say it's such a privilege to hear you speaking to and to see everything you've done. And so thank you. And I'm
Thank you.
so impressed. I mean, where did you start? What town did you start in? And then did you keep going other places?
Mhm.
You've done so much for so many young women so far. So that's great.
Yeah, so the comment is sharing gratitude and just it's a privilege to be here with you and to hear from you and wanting to hear more about how did you start, what town, and how did it grow?
So I'm based in Maryland, so my daughter and I started in Maryland. And we just sat down one day and just kind of put that wish list together of what would a 9-year-old me want to have and what would that experience look like. So we just did our list and start putting things together.
Oh, yes. Yeah, the question is how large are the cohorts and how many people do you accept each year?
So our largest cohort, we won't take any more than 10, just because of the nature of the activities.
So at this point, how many girls have gone through the program since you started?
Well, they're kind of stuck with it. So they don't leave us.
Oh, So it's a multi-year. It can be multi-year.
Yeah, it's continuous. Like I said, we're following them. For instance, the college students were also in Egypt. So two of the young ladies, the one at SCAD and the other young lady who is at Coastal Carolina University, this was their second Egypt trip. So they did their Egypt capstone back in 2019. So when 2024 came around, they were right back with us.
Yes, there's two here. So we were the gentleman first. Yep.
Thanks. Has anybody from your cohort gone on to become a dive professional and then been brought back in as an instructor for the program?
So the question is, has anyone gone on to become a dive professional and then come back to help with the cohort?
So because we just started in 2017, we're just starting to see potentially 3 young ladies who will come back and complete their dive master.
Awesome.
My question was about where you go back to the ship as well.
Yeah, I guess we're watching it happen in real time.
Yeah.
This is when they're going to come back.
Yeah.
I had a question. You spoke about mentorship, and that's something that you support
Yes.
the girls on, matching them with mentors. I know in my own experience, if this had existed when I was growing up, I wonder where I'd be now. It's an incredible program. And, you know, I always tell the story that when I was younger, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I don't know where I got that from, but I guess I wanted to be. And I'm not now, so I don't know what happened along the way, why I stopped. But it is kind of nice that I ended up at an aquarium, so it's like kind of close enough.
Yeah.
But now in adulthood, having mentors around me, and especially people who look like me. So a former manager, my current manager, these are people who I really look up to, and it matters. Representation matters. So I just love to hear more about your experience with mentorship and setting these girls up for success. And you specifically said getting the right mentor, because not each mentor is going to be the same for each girl.
Right.
So can you speak a little more to that?
One of the biggest things is personality, and just making sure that they click. They need to feel comfortable. They need to be in a safe space. I'm very particular with any of the professionals, just their demeanor. You know, it's just a fragile time, particularly when you're talking about 9 and 10-year-olds. Young ladies that are already going through a host of other things.
Brutal.
It's just brutal. So we just, you know, I spend a lot of time with them. So for instance, like Gwyneth Packard, who's actually a WHOI scientist, you know, I spent a lot of time with her, and it was like, oh, she's perfect. You know, she gets it. So just, you know, spending time, making sure that they are dedicated and committed. One thing I don't like is a revolving door. They need consistency. So that's important to me as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions? Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the question is, this is a year-round program, and for this age range, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, how are they balancing doing that with everything else, school and life?
You know, they're really motivated. It's just the unknown. They're just so curious. I think for instance, one of our most, I guess I would say, arduous capstones is the Egyptian capstone, because we require them to take a year of Arabic. So, you know, they have to be dedicated with that. They're learning about civilization, you know, the cradle of civilization. So they're dedicated. They're really just interested. And they appear to, they're working it out.
But it takes that personal commitment and sense. They really have to want
and
to
that's,
do it.
you know, we try to get that sense during the interview. We're looking at those references. It's like if you know, and we also tell parents if your daughter is involved in track and, you know, they're doing a basketball team, this might not be for you. Because, you know, we can't have, oh, I have a game, so I can't do dive training. Like, that's a safety issue. Right. So, you know, we say all that up front.
Yes.
So it sounds like there are a range of ages. How do you tailor the educational program?
So the question is, within each cohort, it sounds like there are various ages. And so how do you tailor the educational content to match for all of them?
Scaffolding, so they start leadership from day one. So the older girls are helping the younger girls. Sometimes the younger girls are helping the older girls with some things. But yeah, that's how we cultivate leadership. We're scaffolding. We have, they're helping each other. So, you know, and there's always that instructor that's there to support and guide.
Yes, up in the back. Oh, that was my question. Good one. Where do you see your organization in 5 to 10 years?
I see us expanding internationally. We were looking at having a chapter in Tanzania, but then COVID came in 2019 and wiped those dreams away. But we're going back at it. We're about to start a chapter in St. Croix. Working with the Minister of Education there, trying to make some connections there, because we have our dive safety officer has a dive shop, owns a dive shop in St. Croix. So we're looking to expand also internationally, doing some more activities with institutions of higher learning, particularly with prior learning credit. Just from my background of being a provost and a dean and understanding, you know, articulation agreements, it's like 95% of my instructors have masters or PhDs. So it's like developing that curriculum that is solid enough that they can earn college credit. So that's my next task.
Amazing. All right, one last question.
Yes, we do.
The question was, does your daughter share your passion? Though that's okay.
Yeah, so, oh God, it's been 12 years for certification. So I took her, I said, look, I'm not rolling by myself. So I'm gonna need you to get certified. So she got certified in Florida. So she's been by my side ever since, you know, it's just cool vacations.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much,
Thank you
Dr.
for
Winrow. Can we
having
all
me.
give her a
It's
round
been
of applause?
amazing.
The work you're doing is so crucial, and we really need more ocean leaders like you to drive this work forward. And on a personal level, I really appreciate everything you do, so thank you.
And then to think, I'm a pediatric neuropsychologist. It's like this.
And we didn't even touch on that. Oh my gosh. You need a whole new hour to talk about that.
I have
Amazing.
no background in ocean science whatsoever. I'm a Pisces. I like the water.
She's a Pisces, everyone remember.
Thank you. 2 weeks.
So thank you everyone for joining, and especially our virtual audience for listening in tonight. And we hope you'll all come back with your friends for our next event in this lecture series on March 20th for a talk titled Sharks and Communities, Insights from Honduras and Indonesia, which will be presented by marine scientists Gabriela Ochoa and Rafid Shadiq. Yes, March 20th. So thank you everyone. Have a great night. Thanks for coming out.